Hey, Trusty Herd. I'm Dr. Tim Thayne, author of Not by Chance and founder of Trusty, and this is the Not by Chance podcast. Here we spotlight the latest innovations in adolescent treatment and show families how to keep the momentum going at home. You'll hear real success stories and proven ideas from intentional experts and families. Why is that important? Because your family's progress and happiness is not by chance. In today's episode, Ownership, the Missing Ingredient in Transition Planning, we'll talk about what professionals have called the Rosetta Stone in changing the dynamic between parents and teens. Okay, so today we want to talk about something that has been bugging me for a long time around the transition planning process, but I couldn't put my finger on it. As you know, I've worked with families for many, many years, deeply focusing on the transition of a teen from treatment back to home, and that transition planning process that happens beforehand. It felt like a ton of bricks hit me recently when I realized that we are not starting it correctly, that we need to really flip the process on its head. And so today we're going to be talking about the missing ingredient to the transition plan. I'm really excited about this because I'm going to just tell you right up front, what's missing is ownership, the word ownership, and where that rests right now and where it needs to rest in the future for this to go well. So I've got Roxanne with me today. I'm so grateful for her. She's been with me along this journey. And so she knows when I'm lighting up about something. She knows when I get excited. You know, even after all these many years, you can tell that I've hit on something here that is keeping me up at night in a good way because I'm really excited about this. I think this is transformative and can make a huge difference.
Well, it's so interesting that you can talk about something for 20 years and then it finally gets to that next level deep where you realize this is truly the foundation of it. And what's been so fun is as you've been sharing this with other experts, the lights go on for them as well. And they go, yes, that's exactly it. Why didn't we think of that sooner? So I think it'll be fun for our audience to hear about that today, that process.
Yeah. So, talking about the last 20 years, at Homeward Bound, obviously, because we specialized in transitioning teens back home again after treatment, the thing that was happening or the process happening just before that, we became very interested in because it impacted what was going to happen afterwards. And we were kind of left holding the bag, so to speak. So, for example, if treatment program, whatever their transition planning was going to be, we sort of had to either try to implement it or find a way to improve it or do something with it. So we became very interested in the transition planning process. And one of the things that comes out of that, obviously, is where parents are working through identifying their concerns and then ultimately setting expectations for their teen so that when they came home, they were clear, their teen was clear before they leave the treatment program, what life was going to be like when they get home. And so what I will say though, is that because we're engaged in that at such a deep level, most of the treatment programs didn't really follow the treatment. Once they left the treatment setting, the teen and back home again, most treatment programs, were focused on doing treatment, not on aftercare.
And some tried.
Yeah, some definitely tried, but they didn't go in deep into that because it wasn't their core purpose.
Right.
Now that it was our core purpose, we started to actually have huge influence on the field because I can't tell you how many times we iterated on the plan. Originally, it was called the home contract, and that's what everybody knew this by. We moved it to something more descriptive. It was rules and consequences. And then over time, we moved it to the plan for moving forward. So you can see that we were learning along the way, and we finally got to this place where we felt really pretty good. And that's a place where the therapist was supporting, the parents were sort of initiating, and they were in the driver's seat. The therapist was supporting, and ultimately they would consult or have the teen come in and give feedback or share their thoughts and feelings about what the parents had kind of come up with, and maybe even adjust that based on the teen's feedback. So we actually advanced it quite a ways. But even with this is what hit me, even with all of that, those iterations and the evolution of that process, the parents were still in the ownership role of the plan. And that really actually is a fatal flaw. We didn't see it, though, at the time because we were intensely supporting the family. So what we're seeing now, and maybe this will get more clear later as we talk about it, but our model at Homeward Bound was to be intimately engaged. We'd go into the home with the family. We had regular contact. They had direct access to us. And so when the plan started to fail, we were right there to prop it up and support the follow through and to get them to talk about it again and revise if needed. And so we didn't really see the full collapse of this transition plan that that everybody invested in so much because we were propping it up, supporting it in an intensive way.
Thank heavens.
Yeah.
I mean, thank heavens we were there because that was the only way it was going to continue. And there's levels of success, but we wanted everybody to have high levels of success. And so that's why it was important to have that intensive help. And we feel like our families really did get that kind of success, those levels.
So we were able, with that kind of model, we were able to support success around that plan and moving forward. And again, that's why we didn't innovate. Now, as we've been working on Trustyy and really understanding what we needed there, I'd had this epiphany that what we needed to do is really flip that whole thing so that it is driven by the teen. They're literally in the driver's seat. They're the ones that initiate it. They're the ones doing a lot of the heavy lifting, the thought that goes into it, et cetera. And we'll get into the details of that. But as I started to do that, I brought in my good friend and past colleague at Homeward Bound. He's one of the original people we hired back then. So he had a huge impact on the evolution of the plan in the first place. And so I've brought him in to help me think through this and make sure that I'm thinking of all the things we can do to help those teens while they're in treatment and then beyond using this new model with technology. But he was sitting back after I showed him this. He said, what I don't understand is, why didn't we do this at Homeward Bound? I mean, this seems so amazing and so obvious now. Why didn't we do it? Well, I think we just answered that question. That's why we didn't, because it was working with our intensive support.
You know, and let's talk about what that fatal flaw looks like. How does it come about traditionally when a kid is coming home from a treatment experience?
Yeah, so when I say the ownership needs to shift over to the teen, I'm not saying that parents shouldn't be involved. In fact, they have a really important role in all of this. But the way the transition plan is structured, it puts the weight of the responsibility on the parents. And so we really need to flip that.
Well, what's happened time and time again is that everybody creates a really solid plan. They work on it. They feel good about it. Everybody checks in. Are we good with this? Yeah, we're all good with this. But just with a couple of weeks after discharge, where's that plan? That plan, it's gone. It's been forgotten. It's a forgotten document. Or worse, it actually becomes a trigger and a battleground for the family now. And that's not the purpose and not even close to the mission. And that's a fatal flaw right now in aftercare. Yeah.
We saw that in our pilot group. It was as this started to really hit us that we needed to really transform that fundamentally. We had some of the families that were in our pilot group, the parents whose teens had already been home. And in the pilot group, we weren't yet using the Trusty app, and we hadn't really created the My Path that we're going to tell you about here. We were just giving them support. And so I asked about that. We had one father, say that his son had been home for about a month, and it had been at least 3 weeks since they'd even looked at the plan, and that his teen at that point were like, that was for way back when I got home, first got home. So he was moving on from the plan. And we were on video watching, the entire group, and it seemed that every one of the parents whose teen was already home in the group, they're going, that's what happened here.
Well, and it's not just that pilot group, it's other experts that you've been talking to in the field that they say that's what's happened when you share that experience of that father. They say, yes, that's what's happened for our therapists. No therapist wants to see all the work that they've done and all of the love and heart that they've invested into these teens come unraveled.
Yeah, so you think about that. So think about a therapist in a program who's there to really see long-term outcomes actually happen with the work that's happened. I mean, they're intimately involved in that. And at the end, they know they need to do this transition planning process. But in the back of their mind, they know that it probably won't exist or be utilized at all within a week or two.
Yeah.
So how excited can you be about that process? So what I think tends to happen, even though they're all well-meaning, they know that this is not that successful. Mm-hmm. And so they're trying to plug the holes in other ways. Instead of focusing on that plan, they try to get other professionals involved. It's sort of like, how much scaffolding can we put around this to help this work out?
And if we can't find professionals in your hometown, well, then just send them back for another month. We'll give them a tune-up. Or you can have a call with us. But again, that's not their expertise. It's just something they're trying to do to plug the holes out of the goodness of their heart. They want to see this work.
They do, but they know it's not really working. And so this is why we're so excited. We know that this can really, we can have a very different outcome.
Well, recently you posted in our Parent Game Changer group on Facebook and asking this question. You were sharing the frustration that you've had and this aha moment that you've had. And you asked if this was a common situation for parents where they find things unraveling very quickly, even with a newly minted home contract in hand. And you asked if this was common. And you got a few responses, and I just want to share a couple of those. One mom said, we spent so much time and energy creating the plan, and within 2 weeks, it was not only completely useless, but a trigger and a battleground, like we said. Fortunately, he was so afraid we'd send him away again that we got by, but that is not how I wanted it to play out. I wanted him to take ownership and do his part to make things work. Oh, that just breaks your heart. Nobody wants to use that threat. But that's what some parents have to resort to. It's the only leverage they've got.
Yeah, we can all relate to that. Even parents who haven't had teens in treatment, we can all relate to the fact that when the teens don't take ownership, we either resort to greater leverage somehow, finding leverage elsewhere. And in this case, she was glad that at least the teen was feeling like, oh, maybe my parents will send me back to treatment if I don't. And that seemed to be enough. And by the way, she didn't want that either. And it was, she knew that was a short-lived solution because ultimately they have to own it. Or we go the other way and we don't address the issues as they're coming up because we know that it's going to cause friction. So it's using leverage we probably shouldn't, or avoiding addressing the issues.
Yeah. Do you want to share what the next mom said? I think that it was just so powerful, her experience.
Yes. So this mother, her reply to my post was about her son. He decided he was going to figure it out his way. Sadly, it took an arrest on 3 felony charges to get his attention. Not what we had dreamed of. Recovery isn't always linear, she said. But eventually, he took ownership. He's alive. He is not using, but the damage is real. And then she said something that I'll never forget. I thought it was just such a powerful image in my mind. She said, stopping the unraveling was like asking a train nicely to halt.
Yeah, that's a visual.
That helps us understand the true feelings of a parent that is powerless to stop something bad from happening. And all of us have been there at some level, but I know that that's really how, if you add to the scenario that the parent's gone through trauma already with their child in lots of ways, that makes this all the more understandable, her quote, because you literally, in that situation as a parent, feel completely powerless. Like you've tried everything. You've had this huge intervention happen, and you had a good plan, and all of that was in place, but here, he didn't own the plan.
Yeah.
He didn't own the plan, so he started to do it his way so he could own it, and his way was not a wise way. And so what does it really mean to kind of flip the script? You know, how does that actually happen? That's what we want to talk a little bit about here. We can't show you exactly all of it because it's inside the app, but we're going to talk about some of the principles behind it. Imagine a situation or a system that instead of you asking your teen to follow your plan, the system supports them as they design the plan themselves. In our case, we have what's called the My Path inside the Trusty app, and it's a gamified step-by-step process that walks them through a series of steps, starting with really looking back in time. And now that they've been in treatment for a while, they're at a wiser place. They've got the ability to have greater insight. And so you've got something to work with at this point. And we want to capture that in this step-by-step process where they're looking back in time. It's sort of like, how did I get here? You know, I'm not mad at my parents anymore for sending me because I'm past that. I'm able to look at my life and kind of how it was stuck and stalled in different ways. My relationship with my parents is not what I wanted. How did I do that? What was my contribution? So it's the perfect time while they're in treatment to have them begin this. You know, a lot of programs will do something like that up front, early in the process, where they're trying to impact the teen's belief system that they don't need help, or that there was no problem, or that because they've in many cases they're not necessarily on their own volition. And so there's processes all the time. It's like, how do you get this moving? And a lot of times it means having them try and look back. Now, they're still resistant at that point. This process kicks in at the end of treatment when they've gained a lot of insight. So they can go back with wisdom now and identify, how did I get here? And yeah, there's some failures there, but inside the failures are a lot of wisdom and learning and silver linings. We talked about that in the past, that they can capture. And now they've got these nuggets that they can take, in their life and move forward.
I'd say it's also they are owning their strengths. They are owning their experiences, their nuggets. So they are not the same person who went into treatment. And that's where we're looking now to the future. And these are some of the questions that we can ask. Number one is, what do I want when I get home? That's one of the things that we talk about. Mm-hmm. How do they answer that? It's not just, I want the cell phone day one, and I want my friends to be able to come over, and I want this curfew, but what is my vision for when I get home?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's like their life plan, mm-hmm. And it's time to dream a little bit, because now they've got the wherewithal to do more dreaming than they did before. And they've got these strengths they've captured. They've got the wisdom that they've got now. And so to walk them along, and the gamified piece is not a bad thing either, because it's like, oh, I get these trust coins. The reality is, imagine, having them take that first step and kind of take an account, and then go back to their therapist and talk through that, gain more wisdom, and then come to you as the parent. It's a great first step. Imagine what's going to happen to your trust. Now, the Trusty app has the ability to help you assess trust at different intervals. And ultimately, what we hope can happen is that the teen can go back in their mind and say, here's the level of kind of trustworthiness I was when I came in. Here's where I think I'm at today. And parents can then do that assessment as well and assess kind of the gap between their trust and what their teen thinks the trust should be. Parents, Since college, my passion has been to help families thrive. For decades after, my team and I delivered the premier in-home aftercare, but it could be costly, and too many families were left without support. That's why we created Trusty, a unique blend of proven curriculum, personalized coaching, and intuitive technology. Starting at just $129 a month, you can access tools and expertise to get and keep your family on track at a fraction of what we used to have to charge. Like we always say, help things go right before they can go wrong. Visit Trustyy.com, spelled with 2 Y's, to learn more and subscribe today. Other steps that they need to take too are things like what you said, what do I want when I get home? And what are some of the barriers that stand in the way of what I want and me getting that thing?
Yeah, what would freedom look like to me?
Mm-hmm.
But what are the obstacles for me getting that freedom? And a lot of these things are the same old fights that you've had for months and years before. But now they're a new, better version of themselves. And hopefully you've been doing your work so you are a new, better version of yourself. And you can have a new conversation about what it's going to look like going forward.
Yeah, and putting themselves in your shoes. To say, now, why didn't I get that freedom in the past? What was not working in the past? How can I solve that problem? How do I solve that obstacle? Now, remember, they're now owning it. Instead of you trying to solve that problem so you can trust them and then give them that freedom, they can work that out. And the more you step out and allow them to work through these things and then come to you with a plan, you become a supporter of their plan and maybe a consultant to make sure that it is really going to actually build trust when they implement the plan. And so there are many steps as a part of this. We've just given you a little flavor, a little taste of what some of those are.
And if you want to peek into the Thayne home for a second, I think it was a couple of podcasts ago, I talked about my son wanting a barn party. And so I put it in the Trusty app and said, if you do these things, well, he was able to earn that barn party. And then it wasn't cleaned up for day after day. And we had to get that fixed. And I had to pull out the big guns and say, you can't have another one.
So think about this.
Yeah.
So that was kind of halfway there.
Yeah.
But you still owned it because in that situation, you still owned it. Imagine if you said, okay, what's your vision? Okay, I want to have this barn party. All right, what are the obstacles to having that? What have you heard your mom say in the past? And okay, how are you going to, now it's up to you. You solve that problem. And maybe there has to be some things he comes up with where he says, all right, I'll prove to you that I can be trusted to do that by actually following through on some of these other things in the Trusty app that then will say, yes, look, I deserve it. I deserve to have that party again.
Yeah.
And that's so we're learning as well as we go.
Well, one of the things that I wanted to harken back to that you said a few minutes ago was to become a consultant. And it was really fun because he asked for the next barn party and said, hey, I'd like to do it on a Sunday afternoon. Would that be okay? And I want to make crepes. I'm like, that's really labor intensive. Even if you have everybody help contribute with the fillings. I said, but what if you did a grazing table? And then I showed him some pictures from Pinterest and he got so excited. He put it out in his group text. All the people were jumping in saying, this is what I'm going to bring. That's what I'm going to bring. They were excited about it. And I felt more invested in helping him get that because he'd consulted with me. And I have some experience I can share with him. And now he's taking the lead and I'm just back there as a consultant. And
I think the difference, and this is very subtle, but if he was not open to your suggestion, he would have resisted the grazing thing.
Mm-hmm.
And so you have to be really careful because even suggestions put you in the ownership role. And luckily in this case, he didn't take it that way. He was ready to be consulted. But with the My Path, what's great about it is they're going to be in a completely different environment. They're going to be doing the steps kind of on their own, really thinking through it with the support of their therapist, and then coming to you. So you're not making a lot of suggestions that they shoot down. And we've seen that happen a lot over the years at Homeward Bound in our process. We started calling it skeet shooting because The parents are just trying to get them to be successful or help them. And so they'll throw out ideas, do this, or what do you think of this or that? And the teen's there with a shotgun just, blasting away at everything. That won't work because of this, or no, I don't like that, or whatever. And so that leaves the parents really, really frustrated. And then obviously emotions start to flow. And there's like, I'm just trying to help you succeed so I can give you the freedoms you want. So we're doing it wrong all over the place by being too involved. Let them come to you with a plan. Then react to it and say, what you want is freedom and trust, and I want the same thing. For that to happen, I'm going to need to help. I'm going to need to suggest modifying it in this way. And they'll go back to the drawing board a little bit and improve it. But by the end, imagine, by the end of this, before they come home, their plan has been authored by them, with you consulting along the way as they needed it. They've been consulting with their therapist, but they own it at the end. It's not only just owned by them, it's inside the app. And I'll tell you from experience, as I've done some work with parents and teens and used these principles, it's been phenomenal. A completely different experience.
I think one of the keys here that we want to point out is that teens don't actually resist responsibility. They resist what? Control. Exactly.
They don't want to be controlled.
Yeah.
They're wired, and they should be, they're wired to call their own shots. And we think it's going to be a train wreck. And really, if they own the plan and we do our part well as leaders, we can have a very different dynamic. That reminds me, I was recently talking to a guy who is a true expert in the field of adolescent treatment. And I shared these concepts with him, and he was blown away. And he said, "You have given me the Rosetta Stone." And I knew that was impactful, but I didn't know the full ins and outs of what that was, but you did.
Yeah, my dad, who was a historian, had a replica of a Rosetta Stone in his office all the time I was growing up. And basically, it was a fragment of a slab that had 3 paragraphs written in 3 different languages that helped unlock Egyptian hieroglyphics because they could compare and learn for the first time what that meant. So I think what this expert was meaning by calling Trusty's My Path the Rosetta Stone is it's unlocking what we have been trying to figure out for years, which is an adolescent's brain and how they're thinking and how they're relating with their parents, and everybody wanting the same thing, but how now to work together to get the same thing.
Yeah. So it's unlocking and removing the old dynamics between parent and teen, and replacing it and locking a completely different dynamic. So you've got the My Path that can be done while the teen's in treatment. But the rest of the Trustyy app is actually to help follow through with that. As we mentioned before, it would be very easy, and it is very easy for plans that have been created to be kind of tucked away and not addressed and not used after treatment. But if it's inside the app, and the app in this case, Trustyy has all the things you would imagine. It has a way to follow up. It has reminders through notifications. And so whatever the teen in the end comes up with is like, I'm going to do this to show you that I'm mature enough and taking enough responsibility that I can have this freedom or this privilege. And it can track all of that so that it actually helps you facilitate the follow-through of the plan, and then ultimately the freedoms and privileges that they deserve, including an increase in trust. So that's what we're excited about. That's why we've been just giddy about what we're going to bring to the field. We innovated a long time ago with Homeward Bound, and now we're doing it again, this time in a way that is scalable and affordable to virtually any family. And we want to change the trajectory of long-term outcomes now by improving that thing, right, that process right at the end of treatment that leads to the home and the dynamics that are going to happen there, to improving that significantly, so that alone, let alone, not to mention the support with coaching and things like that, I believe that alone will change the whole direct trajectory of where outcomes go after that.
I agree. And parents, if you've been listening to this today and you know other parents who are going through this transition or it's coming up for others in your group, we ask that you would do us a favor and them a favor and share this with them. They need the help that Trusty can provide. And it's been our life's work, and we're so happy to get it out in a big way now. So please help us spread the word.
Yes, send them to Trustyy.com. And remember, Trusty has 2 Ys.
Have a great night.
Thank you for being here. To summarize what we've learned today, there are a couple points I want to bring up. First of all, ask yourself, what will you do because of what you've heard today? The other thing I want you to consider is, how can you shift the ownership of whatever it is that you need to over to your child instead of on your own plate? If you're ready to start and be a founding member of Trusty, sign up before April 15th to receive the program at 50% off. This incredible offer is limited to the first 50 families, and it won't be offered again because we only launch once. And next week, I will have Kristen from Wisconsin on the show, sharing her family's story and some of the things that helped her anxiety and preparedness for when her daughter came back from treatment. You'll absolutely love her.